Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to Two Toe Tag's Metal Reviews, and today we're giving you guys our album review of Banished by Sin by Deicide. So we've been listening to this album non-stop for the past week, and I guess I'll open it up and mention, something that I think I mentioned last week in our first impressions, that this is a very guitar-centric album. Yeah. I feel like the main kind of focus is what is the guitar doing here, right? Okay. And there are a lot of solos, a lot of guitar feature that way, and some of them are pretty cool, but some of them kind of just feel like the same kind of noodling and wailing, that you'd
typical
kind of
death metal kind of.
It feels a little too typical. Some of them have some interesting stuff, but I feel like some of them are just like, yeah, whatever. And I think maybe a part of why it feels that way is because there's just so many of them. It feels like every song's got at least two, and it's just kind of like the same deal. So when you hear that so often, it loses, its luster and it doesn't feel as special, right? That's why you have some albums that don't do many solos at all, because when they do, it feels special. But if you have something like this, it's like constantly doing that over and over. It doesn't feel as crazy.
It's like it has to be in every song.
Yeah,
kind of thing. It's
like kind of doing it for the sake of well, we gotta put in a solo.
Yeah, it's solo time.
It's solo time, let's go. Yeah. Let's do 5 solos, yeah.
I don't know about 5, but.
Well, that's just an exaggeration, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But, I did find that there were some songs that did some notably cool stuff in this album that I did enjoy. And I will, reiterate something I said last week, is that this band makes good death metal. Straight up. I feel like if you like this kind of music, this is definitely an album for you. Mm-hmm. Because there's an audience for that, of course, right? Where it's like they're doing the similar kind of death metal deal for all the albums they make, really.
Yeah.
It's kind of that's the vibe. So, this wouldn't be a successful band if there weren't people who are totally into that all the time, right?
Of course. Yeah.
So, it's definitely I would totally recommend this to anyone who just straight up enjoys death metal, because I feel like these guys are very textbook when it comes to that. If you talk death metal, this is one of the bands that's always going to come up in that conversation.
I agree for the most part, but I think lyrically, this might not resonate with a lot of people.
Yeah, and you know what?
Subject matter matters to a lot of people, and when you start, it's not even Satan worship. It's more I'm Satan, and I'm gonna I feel like Glenn's singing as Satan a lot of the time.
It's more so the subject matter is always oh, I hate Christians. Oh, I hate God. That's really kind of what it's been,
through the lens of Satan.
It kind of feels like you've been singing those same kind of things for 30 years.
That's their thing, right?
That's their thing.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, you might love death metal, you might love the blast beats, the growls, all the guitar noodling and all that stuff you mentioned.
But seeing that this guy is doing nothing but saying, I hate Christianity,
over
and over is just can you guys, it could rub people the wrong way, but at the same time, someone could also sit there and think, can this guy sing about anything else?
Yeah.
Anything?
But
that's what this band is about.
That's their vibe, man.
That's the vibe. That's who these guys are, right?
Yeah. And how talented you got to be to actually write? I don't know how many albums they have, a bunch, and have every song be the same topic.
Or just in the same realm of topics.
In the same realm of topics, essentially. Yeah.
Honestly, it's impressive to keep going with that. But so let's talk about some songs.
Sure.
The intro to Faithless has some pretty cool guitar work there, and this is the kind of stuff that I like out of some of the songs on this album, where it's got this cool melody going on, and on top of that, I feel like the main riff has something that you can hook on to, and I enjoyed that as well. So it's the kind of song that you'll walk away from with something memorable for it. So it's yeah, I remember that's the song that has that.
Yeah.
That's a cool thing, and it's also brutal, evil kind of stuff. Back on the topic of solos, Woke from God has a good solo section. That's one that actually stuck out to me. It's a bit more melodic than just the noodly waily stuff from a lot of the songs. It has some cool harmonies in it. I think what especially makes it effective is that it's one of not many more, melodic, if lack for a better term, solos than the kind of noodly sounding ones. I feel like the ratio noodly to non-noodly is kind of tilted in the noodly favor.
Yeah.
So, when you have something that isn't that, it's whoa, what's that? And then it kind of stands out that way.
Yeah, that's true.
I also really like the main riff where they do a bunch of shots with it as well. It's a cool hallmark for the song. Allows it to stand out as well, and I liked that. the Light Defeated, which is the last track on the record, has a cool call and answer thing that it took a while for me to notice between the vocals and the riff. Kind of goes back and forth with that. I thought that was pretty cool. It took me a bit to notice, and I'm like, oh, that's a cool little part of that song. I like that. It was a subtle touch that that I appreciate. I thought that was pretty neat. And the solo section was also cool. Plays a more methodical solo, and I like that as well, especially to close the album. To close the album with a unique solo, especially for an album that's full of them, that's pretty cool. I like that as well. Another thing I liked as well, the intro in Sever the Tongue is pretty cool. It's an interesting riff that they come back to when they hit, back to the top of the form. I think it would be cool if that was the basis for the song and they developed, verse riffs and whatnot off of that, but I mean, it's fine. It would have been like a cool kind of more brooding song that way, and I think there are some faster and slower songs. It's not like it's all one speed, but I think a little bit more tempo dynamic would have been even cooler for this record. Mm-hmm. Have something really slow and evil to contrast the super fast, crazy stuff, which there's plenty of on this record.
I get you, yeah.
I will say, in general, about Glenn's vocals, there's a lot of really cool high screams that he does that are usually only really in the background.
I don't think it's Glenn.
You don't think it's Glenn?
Taylor and Kevin both provide backing vocals for the band, so there's other band members that are contributing. So I think Glenn's doing the main one, lower growl, and then I think there's two other vocals that I hear, and I think one is Taylor and one is Kevin, and I think that those are the guys doing it. I don't think it's a layered studio thing. I think there's contributions from other members in the vocal realm.
And it would even make sense, if they were to play it live, that's how they would do it.
Exactly.
But either way, regardless if it is or isn't Glenn, I like that. I think cool. It's cool. It's subtle when it's in the background, and that's the kind of depth that you like to see in records, right?
Exactly.
You like to see oh wow, it's got this thing here. That's cool. So not only is it this brutal death metal album, but it's got layers. And I like that.
Yeah.
So that's just the general highlights that I have on this record. That being said, I kind of found that a lot of this record just kind of spun its wheels. I got to a point where a lot of tracks were really difficult for me to really discern from each other. To the point of I'd look at a track and be like, okay, how does that one go again? Because I find it would all tend to mesh together a little bit.
Yeah.
And there were the points that stuck out in all the songs I just mentioned with all that cool stuff. But the rest of it was just not too much. It was a very kind of come and go experience with those other tracks. But I feel like some of the tracks get a little bit better when you hit shuffle, because there are some later songs that you kind of feel like you're tired. At least I kind of found myself a bit tired by the time I got to the later songs. But if I hit shuffle and it started on a late song, I'd be like, wait, this song's actually pretty good. But because when I would listen to it from front to back, it would be near the end. So for example, I Am I, A Curse of Death, it's not bad, but it's the second last song, so I'm kind of every time I was listening, I would kind of be just checked out by then.
Yeah, so I get that feeling, but sometimes what I'll do is I'll start in the middle of the album and cycle it through, or I'll just pick specific songs, but I guess shuffling is the same kind of deal.
Same deal, just not in order, basically.
So what you were saying about how, kind of each song feels like come and go or whatever, I think that's something that's a testament to a band's consistency, right? So this is a band I find to be very consistent in their sound and their theme and everything, their presentation. They're very consistent. Album to album, they vary slightly. Some albums show a little bit more creativity in the riffing and stuff like that, and some albums have less. But overall, I find Deicide to be a very consistent band. But that's to a fault sometimes, because then you get a lot of songs that kind of just sound very samey, and you're getting a lot of the same kind of rhythmic patterns and the same kind of vocal patterns and the same cadences and the same riffing patterns and all these things that are just feels like they've been done before. So it's hard to listen to an album like this and really find stuff that stands out. And I'll listen to an album like this, and I love it. I think this is a fantastic album, but to review it is very difficult. And that's the challenge, right? It's great to listen to, but reviewing it is a different story altogether. It's a totally different ballgame. So for my week, listening to the album, I had some highlights too, and I had some low spots. So just want to get the low spots out of the way. There was a few songs that I really tried paying a lot of attention to and really tried finding something that I liked about it, but they just really didn't offer me much. That's track number 2, Doomed to Die. 6, Woke from God. 8, Failures of a Dying Lord. And then tracks 10 and 11, A Trinity of None and I Am I, A Curse of Death. All of those tracks, I tried really hard to like pinpoint something on them, and I just kept coming up empty. It is what it is. The rest of the tracks, however, I have positive things to say. I'm not gonna go through every single one of them, but the highlights for me, I would say are Sever the Tongue, which I think is a fantastic track. I really like the ferocity of this track. I like how the double bass is just ramming through the song, but I also like how the double bass shuts off during the chorus, allowing the lyrics to kind of ring out clearer.
If I recall correctly, Sever the Tongue was the first single before Bury the Cross.
Was it? Okay, yeah.
Or it was either the first one or it was the second one after Bury Your Cross. Either way, it was the other single.
So I like when bands do stuff like that and they emphasize the chorus in a way. Like choruses are always meant to be emphasized, but when they do it like this, like when your music's full of just notes everywhere, and then you kind of take an instrument like the drums is a great example, take it, tone that down, and then allow the lyrics to ring out, you're basically encouraging crowd participation because it enables the crowd to know what the next lyrics are and they're gonna shout it out during the show. It's smart songwriting in my opinion. So I really like Sever the Tongue for that reason, and it's just a badass song overall. You talked about the last song, The Light Defeated, and the solo on that song. I think it's also the best solo on the album. I'm gonna give a nod to the title track solo as well. Both those solos I found were highlights on the album for me as far as solos go. But one thing I noticed about The Light Defeated, the last track, is the bass was a lot more present on this song. Now, bass is something that I think is present, a lot more present on this album compared to other death metal bands. Probably because it's Glenn's band and he's the bass player, so a lot of times you get the leader of the band wants their instrument to be front and center. And I found that this song, the bass was just extra chunky, and I was like, oh yeah, that's doing it for me.
I mean, I figure he probably may be a main songwriter, so to have his instrument, be the main songwriter, I feel like some stuff might be more bass-centric because that's just how he writes the music, right?
Exactly, and I got the beginning of this when you mentioned that this is kind of a guitar-centric band. I don't disagree with that, but I think there's a lot, I would say this is more a bass-centric band, but it's not like overly in your face. It's sprinkled in a smart way.
One thing that's difficult about bass in a lot of metal is that all the guitars are tuned so low that they might as well be basses.
Exactly.
So then the actual bass is tuned low and it's hard to hear. That being said, if you were to listen to these tracks and remove the bass, you would hear so much of a difference.
That's true.
So
exactly.
The bass adds what you don't really realize it adds.
Exactly, and that's true for a lot of music too. Bass is that's why it's so underrated and so underappreciated, because it's just kind of like an in the background kind of thing. You really gotta pinpoint on it.
It's such a foundation.
It's such a foundation, exactly. But let's move on to the song that I thought was the best song on the album. I talked about Sever the Tongue. That's number 2 for me. Number 1 is, what's number 1? Bury the Cross with Your Christ. Sorry, I lost it on my page here for a second. Track number 5. This song, I love this one. It has a great intro, just overall rad tune. I love the double bass, super fast tempo. For me, this one had kind of a decapitated vibe to it, with like the fast double bass with that riffing pattern on top of it. Just love this song. Every time it came on, I was like, okay, here we go. This is the one I'm gonna crank it up for. I mean, the whole album was worth cranking, but you know what? Another thing, we gave a little love to the outro track. The intro track from Unknown Heights You Shall Fall was also a pretty good track as well. It's one of my higher rated ones. It's one of the ones where I think the backing vocals stand out the most, and I think the fact that they're singing, like they're screaming the title of the song super faster in the chorus, I really like that too. It's something they've done before on previous albums where they just scream the title like kind of quickly and like almost like rapid speed, and you kind of almost can't make out what they're saying, but once you finally hear it, you're like, oh, that's cool. So yeah, it's one of those things like, I agree with you on the solos. They can get a little bit, samey, monotonous in a way. But I just think this band, they're good songwriters. It's just, what can they do to impress a little more? I don't know. Are they doing enough? Right? It's hard to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, with that being said, I think it's time to rate this album. And I'll go first and say that, you know what? For people, as I said in the beginning of this video, for people who are fans of this genre, listen to this album. It is exactly what you want and what you are into, 100%. Like, I would definitely recommend it for that. But I don't know if I would say this is a, like, you need to hear this kind of record. I would recommend this to anyone who wants some hard-hitting death metal, or just like hard-hitting metal in general, right? Going for a workout and you need something that kicks your ass, this is a good album for that. But would I say that this is a super standout, you gotta check this out? I don't think I would, because there's moments here and there, but other than that, it's kind of just like stuff.
Yeah.
And there wasn't really too much. And we've reviewed this band before on the channel, and the last record, I believe, got decently favorable scores.
Like double sixes or something like that.
Something like that. But for this one, it just kind of felt like it was getting a bit stale. So it's gonna get a 5 from me. Now, for what it's worth, I did listen to Once Upon the Cross, just to get a reference point as to what some of their older material is like. Like, what were these guys like when they were newer, when they were, you know, fresher on the scene? And I kind of found with that record to feel a lot more kind of creative and fresh in its performance.
Yeah,
you know,
that's a fantastic album.
It was like an album where they still felt like, yeah, we're new, we're still, you know,
yeah,
you can
the
kind
ideas are still pumping out.
Ideas are there. I like the mix on that album. It really sounds like a band together in a room playing, you know, like kind of that old school sound, but not basement tape, so it was nice. And I feel like this is kind of almost, in some cases, kind of done just because, like, we're doing this just for the sake of, like, this is it.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like I wanted more spices involved. I feel like if they sprinkled in a little bit more stuff than what I mentioned out of what I liked, it would have brought this album up for me. But yeah, it's not a bad album per se, but it's fine. I mean, if you're into this kind of stuff, definitely check it out.
What was your score? 5?
5. Yeah.
5. Yeah, so for me, like I said, I like this band, I like this album, I think it's great, but reviewing it is difficult. I feel like about half the album is pretty good, and you can compliment the songs. The other half is just whatever, comes and goes. The struggle that I have with it is that there's just not enough uniqueness to it. Mm-hmm. There's not enough that really makes it sparkle, and that's the kind of thing I'm looking for when I'm reviewing albums. Things that stand out and sparkle, and things that make me want to play something over and over and over again. This to me is run-of-the-mill stuff. I could put it on any time and really enjoy it, but it's hard to give it a really high score, so it's gonna get a 5.5 for me.
And there you have it. Not quite as good as the last album, unfortunately, from this band. A 5 from me, and a 5.5 from Vile Self. Anyways, guys, that's all we got for you today. Remember to like this video if you liked it. Tell us in the comments below, what is your Deicide album tier list? We want to know where this album ranks up against all the rest. Is the old stuff better? Is some of the newer stuff better? We'd love to hear what you guys have to say about that. And subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. I'm TV Fish.
And I'm Vile Self.
And keep the horns up.